And we're going to start with the Parak of Tehillim, Parak Chaf Aleph, if everyone wants to say it together. And for the return of our hostages, the safety of our soldiers, and if anyone wants to have any cholim in mind, for the Furuah Shlema of Chana Bat Simafega and Emunah Bat Leah Rachel. Please have in mind any other names. Shir La Ma'alot, Asa Einai El Heharim, Me'ayin Yavo Ezri. Ezri Me'im Adonai, Oseh Shamayim Ba'aretz. Al Yiten Lamot Raglecha, Al Yanum Shomrecha. Hine Lo Yanum B'lo Yishan Shomer Yisrael. Adonai Shomrecha, Adonai Tzilecha Al Yad Yaminecha. Yomam Hashemesh Lo Yakeka V'yareach Balayla. Adonai Yishmorcha Mikol Ra, Yishmor et Nafshecha. Adonai Yishmor Tzedcha Uvoecha Me'ata V'yad Olam. Okay, tonight's shiur is sponsored by Mrs. Natalie Magenzo, Le'ilui Nishmat Baruch Ben Yamin Ben Moshe, Mrs. Malka Fasten, Le'ilui Nishmat Esther Cyril Bat Yechezkel, Mrs. Paulina Zilberman in honor of Ravin Rebbetzin Weinberger, Mrs. Rachel Lerner, Le'ilui Nishmat Abraham Ben Shalom and Masuda, Mrs. Sylvia Fuchsbrumer, Le'ilui Nishmat Chaim Avraham Yaakov Ben Gavriel, and Yisrael David Ben Aharon Mordechai. Tonight's shiur is also dedicated for the speedy recovery of our dear Rebbetzin Weinberger, Buna Michla Bat Sarah Nechama. Okay, it's really a very great privilege to introduce Rabbi Farhi. We have the great zechut of calling the Farhis family friends. Rabbi Farhi learned in the Jerusalem Kollel underneath got a smicha from Rav Yitzchak Berkowitz. He was really a trailblazer and changed the landscape of London, involved in outreach and education. He's the founder and director of Chazak, which is an educational organization for the Sephardic community. And he really, if you haven't heard him yet, you are in for a very big treat. He is really, I think, probably one of the most sought after speakers in the world. He has a unique ability of bringing Torah to life to literally every kind of Jew. Doesn't matter what the background is, he knows how to speak to that person and bring Torah to life for that person. My husband has the really, really big zechut of working with him on a daily basis through the Safra Synagogue. He's the Rav of Edmund J. Safra Synagogue in Manhattan, and he's consistently amazed by his unique talents and strengths and just his complete dedication to Klal Yisrael. And it really is a very big, big honor to have him here in Aish Kodesh.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the warm introduction and the overstated superlatives. Very, very nice. It's a difficult time, isn't it? It's a difficult time. I live on 72nd Street between Lexington and 3rd Avenue. And yesterday, there was a massive protest on 68th and Lexington, right in front of Hunter College. People marching, screaming, the things that they're saying are unbelievable. Some guy is beaten up on Park Avenue and right on the corner over there. It seems like there's so much going on around us. It seems like we need to filter what we listen to, what we expose ourselves to, because too much is too difficult. And it's made me think a lot over the last few weeks. What does a person do when they're faced with so much, so many waves of difficult news, difficult tzarot? And through that process, I started to think that, even though we've been in this place before, there has to be something in the Torah that communicates how a person is capable of rising above difficulty, pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, overcoming, being resilient. Where do we look in the Torah to be able to experience it? And over this last Shabbat, it really hit me. And I want to share with you some thoughts about what it means to rise above. What does that look like? How does that happen? We read about this past week in the Torah about how Aharon loses two of his sons, the most unbelievable people. And he loses them in the most tragic way on the most tragic day. They're inaugurating the Bet HaMikdash, the temple, and all of a sudden his two sons, they go and they do something which, as Chazal tell us, it came from the right place. They made a mistake, and that mistake cost them their lives. And Moshe comes to Aaron, and he says to him, I thought it was going to be us. When Hashem told me that on the day of the inauguration of the Mikdash, we were going to lose two tzaddikim, we were going to lose the holiest, I thought that was me or you. But it turns out it was Nadav and Avihu. In some ways, didn't Moshe actually make the loss even worse by saying that? By making them into even bigger tzaddikim than Moshe and Aharon? Didn't he make the tragedy even worse? How is that supposed to heal the wounds that Aaron was feeling in his heart? And the Torah tells us, Vayidom Aharon, and Aharon was silent. And in trying to understand how Aharon was capable of remaining silent when he would have wanted to scream, to yell, in fact, there are some opinions in the Rishonim that actually Aharon was not silent. Actually, Aharon was screaming. Vayidom Aharon means, and then Aharon became silent. He stopped screaming. That at least makes sense. But what does it mean that Aharon didn't respond? What does that mean? How is that possible? And how can we get some of whatever that is? And I came across a beautiful pshat in the Chidah. The Chidah says that if what the Torah was telling us is that Aharon was silent, then there are other words in Hebrew to say silence. How would you say someone was quiet? You'd say Vayishtok Aharon, and Aharon kept his mouth closed. But it doesn't tell us that. It tells us Vayidom Aharon. Says the Chidah, there is one other example of this word Vayidom in Tanakh, and that word Vayidom appears when Yehoshua is at war and the sun is in the sky. Vayidom Hashemesh. The Chidah is telling you, by drawing this comparison of these two words, he's communicating to us what Vayidom means over here is governed by what Vayidom means over there. And there are some Mefarshim, by the way, who draw on this comparison, and they say, yes, actually also, the sun was silent too. Who remembers when the sun was silent? Beginning of creation, right? When the moon says you should be mema'et, one of us. You can't have two kings wearing one crown. Hashem says the sun was quiet, that the sun is going to have to shine with all of its glory. And in fact, that's how the Chidah interprets it. Because in this moment, the sun was shining with all of its glory. When it was stuck in the sky, where it ruled over even the rules and the laws of nature, this was the moment that the sun was paid back for its silence all those years ago. But I'd like to perhaps take a little bit less midrashic, let's call it, approach, and try and understand something which seems to be a little more on a pshat level. The Malbim over there tells us that what does it mean, Vayidom Hashemesh, that the sun was silent? Not like the Chidah's explanation. He says, Shehadimama hu hefsek hatinua. Dimama means when something doesn't move. The sun at that moment was literally not being quiet or loud. What was it doing? It was immobile. It was unmoving. The sun was stuck at its current position in the sky until Klal Yisrael was able to do what they needed to do to against their enemies at war. So dimama, says the Malbim over there, what does it mean? It means hu hefsek hatnu'ah. It is the ceasing of movement. Using the Chida's understanding, but perhaps not his outcome, we are left with a beautiful cholent from the Chida and the Malbim. That these two things are similar. They're used only twice in the Tanakh. What does Vayidom mean? Vayidom means and Aharon stopped moving. But what was he doing? That he needed to stop moving. At least in the sun, I understand. What does it mean he stopped moving? It doesn't mean he stopped moving. It means that Aharon was unmoved. Aharon was immovable. If this is the understanding, then we start to really come to grips with what's going on in this moment with Aharon HaKohen. Aharon sees the worst thing that could possibly happen to a person. And what does Aharon do? He doesn't allow it to shake him, to move him. Now, at first glance, that sounds crazy. What kind of father could do that? How could anyone react in that way? Well, us Sephardim, we have a special song that we sing on the high holidays. It's written in the time of the Rishonim. It's called Et Sha'arei Ratzon. Do you guys say that as well? I don't think so. Do you guys have that? Okay. It should make it across into the Ashkenaz Machzorim. I don't know, I have to speak to some people. Like in our Machzorim, we now have Unisana Tokef. I'm not actually joking. It's made it across. It's a crossover hit, right? It's in 2 genres on Spotify. You understand? And I don't know why Et Sha'arei Ratzon has not made it into your book. It should. I want to read you the words of that holy Mizmor. It talks about how the gates of Shamayim are open on Rosh Hashanah. It talks about what once happened on that day in the story of the Akedah. And the language that he uses is so evocative. He says, Ayin bimar bocha, that Avraham, his eye cried bitterly. Vilev sameach. What a fascinating expression. His eyes were crying bitterly, but his heart was filled with joy. We're not reading over here perhaps about an Aharon who is a psychotic, unfeeling father, who's unmoved by the simultaneous death of 2 of his children. We're reading about an Aharon, we're reading about an Avram who understand exactly what's going on, who are not trying to run away from the experience, who are not trying to not feel with every fiber of their being how difficult, how painful this is. But they have a superpower. Their superpower is to be here, to sit in this, to feel every part of it, and not to let it control them, not to let it engulf them, not to let it make them make decisions. I say this all the time to my students. People say, oh my gosh, this person makes me so angry. My gosh, my wife made me so happy. No one should be able to make you anything. They can do something that you can decide to be happy about. They can do something that you could decide is worth getting angry about. But no one should be able to have the control over you to make you angry. Why you give away those keys? So Aaron's power, perhaps his superpower, is that Aharon was able to take this and be unmoved by it. That doesn't mean that he didn't feel. It means that it didn't change his behavior. It didn't change the way he thought. And by the way, I think I have another example of exactly this. When Moshe gets the job of leading Am Yisrael, of being the Navi, Moshe Rabbeinu says, Shelach na biyad tishlach. Send it in the hands of someone else, someone who has already been a messenger of you. Why are you appointing me? You already have a Navi. He's my older brother. He's a tzaddik. Send him. And Hashem says, don't worry. Your brother is going to see that you got the job. V'ra'acha v'samach b'libo. This is the immovable Aharon HaKohen. This is the accepting, the timimut-filled Aharon HaKohen. And it was a greatness that lie in Aaron. However, this greatness in Aaron was something that God didn't want as the leader of the Jewish people. This acceptance, this vayidom. For my friends, what would have happened if on that fateful day, when Am Yisrael was worshiping the golden calf, and Hashem would have said to Aaron HaKohen, Heref mimeni, stand aside, v'achale otam karaga, and I will destroy the Jewish people in a second. What would Aaron's response have been to God in that moment? Vayidom Aharon. And the entirety of the Jewish people would have been destroyed. Hashem says Moshe has to be you. It's the Moshe that's fiery. It's the Moshe that's responsive, that needs to be for that job. But my friends, the Moshe that Am Yisrael needed to be the leader is not the nature of Aaron HaKohen. And every one of us in different situations in our life are meant to channel the powers, the kochot of our forefathers, our mothers, the great tzaddikim that came before us. We're supposed to understand, what moment is this? Is this an Avram moment? Is it a Yitzchak moment? Is it a Yaakov, a Moshe, an Aaron, a David, a Shlomo, a Rivka, Rachel, Leah? What moment is this? What am I drawing on? Which power? And when you pull on that string is open for every descendant of Am Yisrael to channel these special kochot, these special tunnels that the great ones that came before us built and left open for each and every one of us. So maybe Aaron was not the person to lead the Jewish people, but by God, do we need a little bit of Aaron right now? It's depressing, it's sad, but my friends, it made me think that this is a much bigger topic than October 7th, post-October 7th, protests, not protests. A person's in Shidduchim and they think that they finally met the one. And then it breaks apart. A person is looking, trying, doing everything they could do for the job, and then narrowing it down, and they tell them, look, we think it's probably going to be you, and then in the last minute, Daka Tishim, we decided to go another way. What do you do with these moments of difficulty, of setback, and of challenge? How do we channel a little bit of Aaron's immovability? My state of mind doesn't change. I remember there was a young father who unfortunately he lost his wife, and he had 3 children to be able to raise, and he raised them by himself until he eventually got remarried. Actually had 3 more children. But I remember seeing him at the time at the Shiva, and I said to him, you look like you're doing okay. We were good friends. I said, you look like you're doing okay. You look like you're not. And he said, this is not me. This is not how I'm doing. I don't have a choice about how to be right now. I have a job. I have a purpose. I have a mission. I'm the only parent my kids have. So yeah, it's Shiva. But tomorrow morning, my kids need peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So I'm waiting for everyone to leave so I could put lunch in their lunchbox. I said, don't you think that there's someone else that could do that for you right now? And he said, Shlomo, the only thing I can do for my kids right now is make them peanut butter jelly sandwiches. They don't know that everything's going to be okay. The only thing they want is someone, not someone else. They want their father, they want a parent to be able to take care of the things that they're used to a parent taking care of. So I don't know how I'm doing. I don't have a choice. I don't have the time to mourn. Sometimes a person's purpose and mission is powerful enough that what they perhaps would want to or think they might feel is actually pushed aside. That, my friends, is heroic, but it's not Aharon. Aharon is simultaneously doing both. And that's what I want to try and explore together tonight. To get something where you know something, it hits and you're good to go. And it hits again and you're good to go. And it hits again. I remember when I used to play football in Eretz Israel. And I remember that we used to play on Friday. And the first Shabbat morning that I woke up, after playing offensive and defensive line, I don't know if you know what that is. Offensive and defensive line means you're trying to protect the quarterback from being killed by all these people who are trying to get to him. Defensive line is you're trying to kill the quarterback and get through all the people who are trying to protect him. Not a job for a good Jewish boy, I'll tell you that. Anyway, the next morning I woke up and I distinctly remember that my brain was telling my arms to move and my arms were having none of it. I remember I was just sitting on the bed, I was like, what is happening? This is not how this usually goes. I was black and blue in every part of my body. There are times when a person takes hits and they can't move, and they can't grow, and they can't walk, and they can't achieve, and they can't function in their job, and they can't be polite, and they can't talk to family, and they're completely shut down. But there is a mahalach, there's another way. And that's really what I wanted to share with you today. And I found in trying to understand what this looks like, my favorite thing in the world is finding bits of Torah that just slice through thousands of years, and it's like right here with me and you, right here in the way that we think, in the way that we need, instructing us, lighting us up on fire. So I want to share with you what I found exactly on this. There's another example of that word, not in the same iteration, not in the same language. Vayidom, the Chidah tells us that there's two places, and he's right. Maybe there isn't others like that. I don't know Tanakh by heart, okay? But my friends, there's another word there, the word that the Malbim quoted. The Malbim said what? Dimama. What is dimama? Dimama is hefsek tenu'ah. Not moving this way, not moving that way. I don't get too happy, I don't get too sad. Nothing makes me happy or makes me sad. I am in control of myself. Okay, that idea. Where else do we find that language? And I remembered where I remembered it from. I remembered it from Eliyahu Hanavi. And I want to read to you the Pesukim, because the Pesukim are amazing, but the Abarbanel will knock your head off. And I don't have time to go through the whole Abarbanel, so those of you who can, or who have it at home, should go and see this Abarbanel from beginning to the end, because I don't have time to do it justice. I'm just going to take a little tiny excerpt, something that really fits for our purposes tonight, okay? Let me read you first the Pesukim. Eliyahu Hanavi is running for his life. And suddenly the malach comes to Eliyahu Hanavi and he tells him, Vayomer, tzei ve'amadeta bahar. Go out, stand on the mountain, lifnei Hashem, in front of God. Ve'hineh, and behold, Hashem over, God is passing. V'ruach gedolah, a heavy wind, v'chazak, and that was strong. Mifarek harim, it's uprooting mountains. U'mishaber sla'im, and it's smashing rocks. Lifnei Hashem. Lo beruach amunai. Ve'achar haruach rash. And after that great wind, Hashem was not there. All of that power, that was not God. Ve'achar haruach rash, a tremendous noise. And Eliyahu realized, lo berash Hashem, God was not in the noise. Ve'achar harash, and after the rash, Aish was a tremendous fire. And shockingly, Lo ba'esh amunai, God was not in the fire. Ve'achar ha'esh, and after the fire, kol dimama daka. Translated normally, everyone translate this as A sound of silence. That's not from Simon and Garfunkel. That's from Tanakh. Kol dimama daka. The sound of the thinnest, finest silence. But I remembered that the Malbim taught us that dimama doesn't mean silent. What does dimama mean? It means something that is immovable. Something that is so powerful that no matter what comes against it, it sticks, it's powerful, it's there, nothing can change it. That's what dimama means. And I read the Abarbanel and my mouth hung open. I want to read it to you. I'm going to read it to you inside. And after, he explains each piece. But he says, and after the noise, Zachar ha'esh, the pasuk says that the fire came. It mentions the fire. What is the fire that God was not in? This Abarbanel is wild. Oh, so excited. Okay. Sometimes I realize that other people are not as excited by rabbi things as rabbis are. I know. Like, this is amazing. And the person's like, yeah, okay, fine, whatever. When's the Knick game? Okay. They knew to schedule me, not against the Knicks. Otherwise, what was the chances anyone was coming? Okay. So why does it mention the fire? And what is this fire that Hashem is not in? Vihu ha'esh. Hold on to your seats. This was the fire. Asher horidu behar Har Carmel. That Eliyahu HaNavi had brought down on Har Carmel. Al habama asher banashama. On the mizbeach that he built there. Now, let's just give a little quick recap in case you don't know this. I remember when we were kids, there was this tape called out from, yes, there was something called the tape for all you young uns. A tape has nothing to do with something that's sticky. It's something that you use a pencil in to move the tape at the bottom. Okay, and that's how we used to listen to music. Okay, now this tape, okay, it had a story about the Baal. Some of the older people in this, some of the less younger people in this room might know this tape. And on the tape, I forgot the name of the rabbi who told the story, but he would go, Baal, Baal, Baal. No, anyone know this one? No? Okay, it's just me? Oh, you got it. Okay, good. Right? And you're not even from the less older people. Okay. Yes. And it's a story about Eliyahu and Har Carmel. And what is the story that is on this tape? I was always terrified of that tape, by the way. There's a few tapes that literally, if I go to Gehinam, I probably will for something, a little bit maybe, they're going to have these tapes playing very loud. I have made myself a Gehenim playlist. Has anyone else done this? No? Does anyone know? I have like a mixtape for Shamayim and a mixtape for Gehenim. And I feel like, I don't know, I'm a weird guy, that if I listen to the Gehenim playlist enough, that when I get to Hashem's like, you've already suffered enough. Okay. The story over there, just to remind you, is that the Jewish people at the time are serving both Hashem and idols. They're doing both. And Eliyahu Bahar Carmel is the story where Eliyahu says to the Jewish people, like, until when? Until when are you going to serve Hashem and idols? Choose one. Ad matai atem poschim hashnei seifim. Until when are you going to stand in both doorways? Choose one. If God is God, then let it be Him. And if the Baal is God, let it be the Baal. I suggest a challenge. We're going to go to this place, Har Carmel, a giant valley. I'm going to get a korban. The other guy's also going to get a korban. Each one of us is going to pray to our God, and whichever God sends down the fire to consume the korban, that's the real God. Anyway, the story quickly goes. The two korbanot are there. They get one. They each put the thing down. Now the Baal people, very sneaky, they decided ahead of time they were not losing this bet, even though their God is as fake as some people's tans. So this God, in this moment, right, they were not going to lose this thing. So they sent in a Baal guy. You don't understand. Next door to my home is an unlimited fake tan store. I don't know why Hashem put this next to me. Probably another get out of Gehenna jail free card. Anyway, so they take one of their guys and they hide him under the Mizbeach. And this guy's ready with a match, okay? And as soon as they call for the fire, he's going to light it, and that's how they're going to win. They're going to cheat. Well, Eliyahu Hanavi davened to Hashem that everything should work out, and this this should go according to plan. And a snake comes, and this guy sitting there, ready, sitting pretty, is ready to light the fire. A snake comes and bites him, and he dies. The Baal people, unaware of said snake death, okay? It did not show on Yeshiva World at the time. They were not aware that he had since died via snake bite. And they start screaming, the Baal and the fire and everything, and nothing's working. And Eliyahu is like enjoying this. He's like, maybe you need to scream louder. Maybe your God is on vacation. Like, even back then, Eliyahu was mic dropping. I don't know. I don't even know if he knew what he was like. I feel compelled to do this. I don't know why, but sometime in the future, they'll understand. Anyway, there'll be a tape about me. Anyway, so, right, he drops the mic, and they can't do anything about it, and the guy's dead, and now it's Eliyahu Hanavi's turn. And Eliyahu Hanavi, just to kind of up the ante, then takes water, and he starts pouring it on the korban, and he's pouring it on the mizbeach, more and more water, just to illustrate that this is going to be me'al derech hateva. And then he prays to Hashem, and a fire comes down and eats up the korban, and the entire Jewish people say, Amonai hu ha'elokim, Amonai hu ha'elokim. Now we, I don't know, I think you guys do it too, right? Right? You guys do that too? Same God, but come on, right? But I just don't know if it's in your tefillah. Okay, so this sentence, right? Hashem hu ha'elokim. God, Hashem, He's the only God. You know where that comes from? This is the story. This is the backstory of that sentence. The whole of the Jewish people are watching it together, and everyone says it together. Do you understand the level of Kiddush Hashem that moment was? Like, that's pretty intense, right? Can we all agree? That's the story of Eliyahu Har Carmel. That's the story of the fire that Abarbanel is talking about. So Hashem says, I'm going to be there. Go stand outside on the mountain. Stand there, and I'm coming. And there's noise. It's not noise. Hashem's not in the noise. And there's wind. Hashem's not in the wind. And there's fire, and Hashem's not in the fire. Says Abarbanel, what does it mean Hashem is not in the fire? It means it's referencing. He was hinting to Eliyahu Hanavi, I am not in the fire that you brought down on Har Carmel. That was the biggest Kiddush Hashem maybe ever. Lefi shelo asa oto hanisayon b'mitzvat Hashem ubidvaro. Because Hashem had never commanded Eliyahu Hanavi to do that. Where was Hashem? Not in great noise, not in fanfare, not in Instagram lives of you doing something in public. Not even the biggest Kiddush Hashem of your life. Not in that davening moment where you were on fire. I remember once I was teaching a class on tefillah. We had some Ba'alei Teshuvah there. Sorry, can I just share something that happened today? Is that okay? This is only for my own amusement, so. We had a siyum today in Pirkei Avot. It was amazing. We finished Pirkei Avot together. I have a ladies' class, and at the end of Pirkei Avot, we went back and we did again all of the 48 ways that Torah niknet b'hem, that you acquire Torah, you acquire wisdom. Each of the ways we went through took us about 4.5 years to finish Pirkei Avot, and another 1.5 years for the 48 ways. Okay? Today we had the siyum. Thank you. And one of the ladies said, you know, I grew up from, and someone asked me, sorry. Someone asked me if I was a BT. And she says, and I didn't know what a BT was. Is there anything more FFB than that? Am I right? She says, I thought they said BLT. And I was like, you know more about bacon, lettuce, tomato than Balei Tshuva? Because you're from birth. I was dying, but I was like, yes, go on. It was so precious. And she's very special. This woman drives all the time for the stream. She's an incredible person. But you see sometimes people, they grow up, there's such space between themselves and the understanding of something. And I think, and I feel with regards to this, that that's us. You think to yourself that the greatest moments of your life, you know what they are. They are so holy. They are at the Kotel. When you did this thing, I don't know for the life of me. Why is it that women who daven hide their faces in Sidurim, and men who daven close their eyes and do this? Why? Who told men to do this and look constipated, and told women to do this and leave lipstick marks on the shul Sidurim? Where did this I don't know, like, is there a book somewhere that I am not aware of that has like Jewish etiquette? I'm not sure. Either way. So you think that it's that moment when you were at Kever Rachel, right? So I was asking this group of people, and they were all basically all relatively traditional or frum, and there was one Ba'alat Teshuvah there, and I asked them when was their moment of tefillah that they most were connected with Hashem. And again, pardon me for sharing this in a shul, Mechila. Everyone said this, exactly what you'd imagine. First person, so unique. When I went to seminary, I was like, kill me now. Right? And the first time they took us to the Kotel, and they covered our head with sacks. Like, why is seminaries getting these tricks from Al-Qaeda? This is weird, okay? And they came to the Kotel for the first time, and they took it off, and I'd never been to the Kotel, and I was crying, and I was praying, and my siddur, and whatever, and they're like, wow, it was so special. And that was her most, and then the next person, and it was all relatively like that. I was in my shul on Yom Kippur, Unusana Tokef. I was at the Kotel, I was at Kever Rachel, I was at Yonasan Ben Uziel in Amuka, davening for a shidduch. Amazing, all the things that you'd imagine. And then one girl says, it was in a crazy club in Berlin. All of a sudden, everyone's like, oh, okay. Tell us more, bacon, lettuce, tomato. And she relates about how she was someone who didn't really connect ever with Yiddishkeit. And she went to this club. She wasn't religious. It wasn't a thing that she thought that she shouldn't be doing. But the music was crazy, and the noise was so loud, and the lights were strobing, and everyone's dancing, men and women, and everyone was on either drunk, on alcohol, or on drugs. And she said, and my friend took something that somebody gave her. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the dancing, with all the lights and all the noise and all the loud, and I noticed my friend was shaking, and she started convulsing, and stuff started coming out of her mouth and her nose, and I saw her eyes roll back in her head, and she collapsed, and she fell in my arms, and I started screaming for help, and for a doctor, but no one could hear me. The music was so loud, no one was even looking, and I was screaming, turn off the music, somebody help my friend, somebody help my friend, I think she's dying, and she's holding her friend dying in her arms. And then she said, and I turned to Hashem. I'd heard of him. I didn't know if I believed in him. And I said to him, please, if you're out there and you could hear me, don't let my friend die. Not here, not like this. Her friend Baruch Hashem survived the incident. I don't know exactly the end of how she got the help that she needed, but she did. And that was her most connected moment of tefillah with Hashem. Lo beruach amonai. Sometimes God is not found in ruach, in the most ruchnius of places, in the most ruchnius of nisyonot, of experiences. Sometimes Hashem is not found in that. He's found in kol demama daka, in a noise, a moment, a sound, which is immovable. He's found in the least inspired davening of that father after losing his wife and making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And he's davening by himself in the corner. And he's davening quickly because he needs to get his job done. And the next one needs to get their pajamas off and into their clothes. And it's the least inspired tefillah that he ever made in his whole life. And he feels disconnected from Hashem in that moment. But nothing could be further from God's truth. It's your experience. It's the way you see it. But from Hashem's perspective, it's so different. That uninspired Amidah, you're upset it wasn't 6 minutes long. I'm happy it happened at all. I'm proud you showed up even a little. How easy would it have been for you to just skip it completely? Because how could God do this to me? Kol d'mama daka, in the thinnest, quietest sounds of a voice that was immovable, that nothing could shake, an emunah that trumped and triumphed over all. I remember I used to lead many trips to Poland, and we got to hear some of the most unbelievable stories you could ever imagine. Not just stories of miracles, and then it worked out and this person lived, okay? 1/6 million. That's not how you decide that Hashem is there, or not there for that matter. But then we got to hear the story from a fellow who tells us about a rabbi in his barracks who was the only one who still throughout everything maintained his posture, his emunah, his hope, his determination, his fortitude. They broke everybody else. Everybody else, he said, we felt like we were animals. If there was any food, we grabbed it. If there was a chance to grab the shoes off of somebody who had died, and those shoes fit us and they were more comfortable than the shoes that we were wearing, we would strip them naked because we needed to survive. We did everything we could just to live. And we watched this one person. And this rabbi, we always said, if we ever get out of here, he's our ticket back to who we once were. He's the one that remembers what we once were like. And then one day, in the middle of the winter, it was freezing cold. We were all malnourished, freezing. And they walked in, and the Nazis knew. They knew how cold we were. So they walked into a packed barracks, how much we needed the nutrients. And they took a little metal bowl, and he threw it into the middle of the barracks. And in it was a little square of butter. He says, I'm ashamed to say, every man in that barracks dove for the bowl, for the fat, for the protein that they desperately needed to survive. I heard from Bobby Ava Newman, who managed to smuggle in some diamonds with her into Auschwitz. And she was given a job in Canada. Canada is not a country, even here. But Canada over there was a place where they sorted everything. And someone came and said to her, listen, if you have any valuables, I know how to hide the valuables. Some people would hide them in various things. And she wound up, while sorting through the clothes, I heard this from her own mouth, she saw a long dress, beautiful dress, but the buttons on the front of the dress weren't even. So almost out of habit, she started fingering the buttons, feeling what they would feel like as she moved them around. And as she moved the buttons around, the top of the button came off, and hidden inside of the button was a diamond. And under the next one, another diamond. And under the next, I think she had 3. She came back to this guy and said, "You remember you told me you could hide it for me? I have something of value. Where would you hide it?" He says, "I used to be a shoemaker. Give me your shoes." He took the heel off of her shoe, put the diamonds in the empty spot in the heel, and then put the heel back on with the nails into her shoe. And he said, "Make sure you save it for the right moment, for a moment that you'll save your life. This is going to be something that hopefully will save your life." You know what she used the diamonds for? I know what she used 2 of them for. One of the diamonds she used, she traded it for a pot of soup. I see you know. Do you know her? There you go. Now you know that all my stories are true, by the way. Unless I planted her there and she came with me, okay? But other than that, if you guys know her, then I'm not a liar. And then she shared the soup that she had traded for with everyone else. And the second diamond she traded for, what would you think? A loaf of bread, right? Tell them, what was the second diamond traded for? You forgot? A bag of salt. Because the soup really needed, no, I'm joking, that was, sorry, I can't help myself, I'm just a weird guy. And I like a lot of salt. Intuitively, human beings know what they need in order to survive. I don't know if you know this. My child in Israel was eating mud out of the flower pot. And she used to, we would run after her, and she would get there first and stick it in her mouth, and she would give you that little smile, and half of her teeth were covered in mud. It was horrible. And we went to the doctor, and we said, he's like, anything else you want to share with me? We're like, I don't know if this is a thing, but she eats mud. I'm a little concerned because I'm not really sure if the mud is milchigs or fleishigs, and we had earlier. And the doctor said, "Oh, yeah, she's probably iron deficient." I was like, that is not a thing. Children don't have an idea. I've been going through these charts. It seems this number is a tad low. Right? They know, they just know. And he said, and you know what else you find in Israel? You find babies licking the walls of the house. And if your baby licks the walls of your house in Israel, right, it's because the walls have limestone and the child is calcium deficient. Ma rabu ma'asecha Hashem, how great is God's world and God's creations. Of course, that's in Israel. If your child is licking the walls here, you just go get a refund. That's a deficient one. She traded the second diamond for a bag of salt because she knew that she needed the sodium somehow. So she actually was craving salt. And when she saw that someone had a bag of salt, she traded a diamond for a bag of salt. This is where people were at. So as soon as, this man tells us, as soon as they threw the butter in, all the men fell on the butter. Everyone's punching, clawing, trying to grab the butter. It's pikuach nefesh. Finally, everything's gone. There's nothing left in the bowl. We all got up. A little ashamed, but it is what it is. But then we saw this man who was once the rabbi throw himself on the bowl, licking the bowl with his hands, doing everything he could, and there was a moment of absolute silence in the barracks. And then the laughing of the Nazis as they realized that they finally broke the last one. As soon as the door slams, the rabbi stood up, he said, and he took a piece of wood from the barracks and he started dragging it on his tongue and on his cheeks and on his hands until finally he managed to pull out the tiniest amount of butter. He leaned down and put the butter in a crack in the floor, ripped a thread off of his striped pajamas, and said, Baruch atah Adonai Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Chanukah. שעשה ניסים לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה. The miracle was not in the oil like so many years ago. The miracle was in the person. Was when a person was capable of remaining themselves against all odds, against every wave seeking to smash, to batter. That's the God in Kol Demamadaka. You having a rough day? Cut yourself some slack. What could you do? What can you bring? The most precious tefillah in that girl's life was that moment in a club in Berlin. But perhaps the most precious tefillah that God heard in heaven on that day was also from a club in Berlin. A daughter reaching out to him who hadn't called in quite a while. Could you imagine what Hashem felt when she finally reached out to him because she needed him? Ladies, I think what Abarbanel is teaching us, what Aharon is teaching us, is this yesod. You're struggling, something's hard, something happened. The key word is something happened. You know, not every day is going to be a good day, but in every day there's something good. And maybe if I could find in this new day something good, with all the difficult stuff that's going on in it, if I could find something good, is that not enough? We were in Colombia just now on a Pesach program, and it was very hot, and it was very muggy. Machloket haposkim, if it was hotter this year or last year. But there was this 5-year-old kid in the elevator who said to his mother, I was smiling. The kid says to his mother, I love coming to Colombia. It's so nice here. I love Colombia. I love it. He used to sing. And she said, why do you love Colombia? And this little kid says to his mother, because everyone's face is shiny. I have since taken that child home with me because that level of cuteness, it's so sweet. But he found something good, something beautiful. Moshe comes to Aharon and he says, you've suffered something unbelievably difficult. But understand, you raised 2 kids that were bigger tzaddikim than me and you. And now is not the time for humility. Ain't nobody like the 2 of us. And they were better. And yes, it's horrible and it's difficult and it's painful. But could you understand? Could you focus? Could you take solace in? Could you feel what you have? Not what you have not. What did you get when you saw, when you felt that? Yes, it's tragic. The saddest Shiva homes are not the homes where everybody's crying. Because if people are crying, in sadness is beauty. If they're crying, it means that there was love, that there was something there that they missed that was worth crying over. What is much sadder is going to a Shiva house where ain't nobody crying. That's sad. But that is the koach of Vayidom Aharon. Aharon understood what he'd got, what he'd achieved in that minute, and that his kids had become the most beautiful Kiddush Hashem ever. V'nikdashti b'toch b'nei Yisrael. Ladies, one tip, one understanding of how to rise above is to recognize that you haven't dipped below. And although certain parts of your circumstance make you feel like you aren't where you were or where you wanted to be, but the secret is an understanding that you don't always know where you're supposed to be. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who has the full plan, not us. I'll give you an example of this idea. Moshe Rabbeinu comes to the mountain and he sees the burning bush, and Hashem says to Moshe, Shal na'alecha me'al raglecha. Take your shoes off, for the ground that you are standing on, Admat Kodesh, who is holy ground. I once heard a beautiful understanding in this pasuk. The ground that every person in this world is standing on, in this very moment, is holy ground. You're not supposed to be in any other place. And when God, like we say every morning, was mechin mitzade gaver, he arranged the steps of this man. He made sure that you took exactly on your pedometer 472 steps so that you'd be standing exactly in Admat Kodesh, in the holy place. And what is the holy place? Lo beruach Amonai, not at the Kotel. And what is a holy place? Not at Kever Rachel and not in Amuka. It might be in your house. It might be with your difficult marriage or your difficult child. It might be with your lack of parnasah. You're standing in the holiest of places. Yours. For the land that you are standing on is Admat Kodesh. It only happens to be Admat Kodesh. You know who made it Admat Kodesh? You did, by the fact that you're standing on it. If I'm supposed to be exactly right here, why does Hashem want me here? There's a famous pshat in the pasuk that we say in Hallel, Lama Yomru Agoyim. Why should the nations say? And I saw an alternate pshat with a Hasidish heart that says it doesn't mean why should the nations say, but rather why Lama Yomru Agoyim. The nations of the world, you know what they say? They say, why? Why is this happening? Why did I get fired? Why do I have this kid or this job? Or why are my kids not getting into school? Why? But that's not for a Jew. A Jew doesn't say lama. A Jew says lema. For what? For what am I here? Hashem knows exactly what he's doing. And although we cannot figure out why, we accept. Vayidom. We relax. We let go and we trust. Trust doesn't mean that you get to see the end of the story. In fact, when you get to see the end of the story, oftentimes, that's not emunah. Trust is when you don't see the end and you can't figure out why, but you still believe that it's that way for a reason. When I got married, I did not have the tiniest inkling that I would do what I am doing. I knew I wanted to go into chinuch of some kind, but the fact that I would move to England was never in the agenda. I am like Deal, New Jersey Syrian. Okay, 50% off because my mother's Ashkenaz, but who doesn't love a sale? I was going to live from the time I was a young man, a bacher. I was going to live in Deal or in Eretz Israel. Those were my two options. But when the time came, and I learned by Rav Berkowitz, and Rav Berkowitz told me that a rabbi's life doesn't belong to him, belongs to Am Yisrael, and it's a rabbi's job to figure out where Am Yisrael needs him the most. It happened to be, it was in London. So that's where I went for 13 years. And then My rabbi told me after we got an invitation and a request to come do this job from Manhattan, that that's where we should go. I can tell you one thing. I don't know what the odds would have been of me being able to go live in London if I had married just anyone from Deal, New Jersey. That's a lie. I know exactly what the odds would have been, and they would have been 0. I didn't know it at the time. Hashem set me up with someone that I needed, but I didn't even know that I needed. She herself probably would have told you at the time that she didn't know, that she had it in her to be able to move and open up our home. We had people coming all hours of the day or night, students coming on Shabbat, driving there, no religion, doing anything, saying anything. Our house was a place that invited and welcomed every Jew of every type. I once served the last meal on Simchat Torah in our home at 3:30 a.m. Who puts up with that kind of stuff? I don't know, but he does. Lema. To rise above is to recognize that I don't know why I am here, but there sure as heck is a reason why I'm experiencing this. Let me figure out what I get to use it for, what it powers, what it energizes, what it enables. And when a person lives that way, then it kind of almost doesn't matter what happens. That sounds like a crazy place to be, right? No? What do you think? I remember at the time people asked me, do you want to move to New York or do you want to stay in England? And I said, I don't actually mind. Whatever the right thing to do is, wherever the right place to be is, that's what I want to do. That's something that takes a long time to be able to see in your life, to be able to feel. But when a person feels that way, effectively, they're immovable. Good, bad, it's all the same. That is the power of Aharon HaKohen. I always thought to myself that maybe that's why Aharon gets to give us this beautiful bracha, the bracha of Birkat Kohanim. Daber el Aharon vel banav. Make them give this amazing blessing to Am Yisrael. And what does the blessing end with? V'yasem lecha shalom. Most people think that those words, v'yasem lecha shalom, what do they mean? They mean you should have peace. Don't fight with your wife. Don't fight with your kids. Don't fight with your friends. That's what v'yasem lecha shalom is. But maybe a deeper understanding is not v'yasem shalom, but v'yasem lecha shalom. You should be in a perpetual state of peace of mind, of not letting something ruffle you, move you, ruin your day, ruin your time, ruin your emunah, and understanding that if you're in that compromised place, that Hashem knows it too. And what you bring to the table is beautiful. And if it's half what you normally would, Hamechin mitzadeh gaver. That's what it means. Hashem should bless every single one of us to be able to enact these great midot that we see in our forefathers. That we should be able to bring the kol demama daka, that silent sound which is so filled with God because it is immovable, because it has that tremendous emunah inside of it, and that it understands that it is, and you are, and we are exactly where we need to be. The greater the problem, the greater the result. So I kind of feel over the last 6 months, I've been in a weird place. I kind of feel like while everyone was saying it's so bad, oh my God, it's getting worse. This is terrible. That's horrible. I'm kind of getting excited. Not by how bad it is, but if this is how bad it is, if this is how far back we're being pulled, how far forward is the arrow going to fly? To rise above sometimes is only about changing a person's mindset. Something as small and as simple, from lama to lema. From understanding that we don't need great noise, and we don't need fire, and we don't need any of those things. What are you supposed to do? If you ever go to Israel, you'll know that when they give you directions, they tell you, they never give you directions, is the short answer. How do I get there? Yashar, yashar, tish'al shama. You just go straight and then ask over there. I've always been perplexed by this. Am I not mature enough to have all the directions? Do you think if you give me all the directions, I'm going to sell the secret to Jordan? Why can't you tell me all of it? I don't understand, right? And then you get there, by the way, and the guy just tells you right. You're like, that's all he kept out? Just right? And finally I realized it was Hashem talking to me. Hashem was telling me that you're so busy trying to figure out where you need to go. And oftentimes, it's not about where you need to go or what needs to happen or how you're going to be saved or how the situation's going to turn around. You do one thing. Yashar, yashar. Just keep on swimming. Straight. You know what you need to do. You know what tefillah is. You know what Shabbat is. You know what kosher is. You know what midot are. You know these things. Don't worry about how to get there. You just worry about how you are being. He'll figure out how to get you there. And if a person feels that and believes that, then Be'ezrat Hashem, Yashar Yashar will take us directly to Mashiach. We won't have to ask where. We won't have to ask why. And I believe that the proof for this is in the Navi, where it says that when Mashiach comes, the Gvaot and the high places, the mountains, and the Bekaim, all the valleys, what is Hashem going to do? He's going to make the valleys higher, and he's going to take the mountains down. Why is Hashem doing that? Is this like Hashem's magic special? Like on Netflix. He's like, and for my next trick, look, I'm going to shrink this mountain. I'm going to bring up this valley. Why does Hashem need to do that? He doesn't do unnecessary miracles. The answer is, when you are where you need to be and you've done the things you need to do, you don't have to figure out how to get there. Hashem brings the place to you. Ki adama asher ata omed alea admat kodeshi. Thank you.